Hey everybody, so HonestlySarcastc here with Tuesday's chess day. Um, kind of, short on people right now. Corona, sickness, super busy, a lot of, tech field work. So I'm here with you today to give you the patch notes for 0.9.2 and my overall thoughts on it. Not going to do much meta today, but we'll go over the patch notes and what I kind of expect to see from, the overall stuff like this. So in the last one, there was the developer notes. There was a state of beta. I think we went over that. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you, but it was interesting the way that they talked about stuff and like going to mobile and whatnot. But we'll go straight into the nerfs and buffs. So Hecarim definitely got hit this time. Some people believe it's wasn't a big enough hit. Some people believe it was. I don't think anybody believes it's too big of a hit, maybe, but the breakdown is on Hecarim himself, we've lost 1 health. So it's just like from that grand perspective, you're just like, wow, that's not like really amazing. They also noticed that you weren't flipping him nearly as much or leveling up. I use flip instead because like you see the card to like spin around. But anyways, they've switched from 8 ephemeral units attack to 7. To try to make it much more reasonable to kind of get that flip. The one less I think is relatively huge. There were a lot of situations where I could, let's say, have like a Z attack or just one ephemeral unit, but getting to 8 was kind of hard. We'll see if this kind of changes anything for getting the flip. The main power differential that they adjusted, though, was that they changed the shadows. The Spectral Riders are now 2/2s as opposed to 3/2s. So overall, Hecarim just only lost 1 health. Because they changed the Spectral Riders to 2/2s, what happens is they added +1 attack on the Hecarim ability on his level up. So essentially, if Hecarim levels up, those Spectral Riders are still going to be 5/2s, but they've reduced some of the power from that turn 6. Cast Hecarim, swing for 10. Now it's cast Hecarim, swing for 8. Kind of dealing with 2/2s is much more reasonable. If you have any 2/3s, 3/3s. They're just, they can block and survive if you wanted to now. That's really nice. And just overall, the swings not being for 10 means that you can kind of suffer through the attack a little bit better. With Hecarim now only having 5 health, it also means that any of the 5-drop 5/5s or like things like Ash 5/3, there's a feasible amount of guys with 5 attack. Garens can now actually just kill Hecarim or trade depending on obviously your health stat. So I think that's going to be a pretty good adjustment. Do I see this being like, oh my god, can't run Hecarim, he's terrible now? No. Do I see it scaling back some of the power? Yes. Like there were a lot of games where I would have a full board or Hecarim would come out and I would decide to, swing with Hecarim and I'd leave obviously my 2/1s or 2/2s in the back. Now if I have a 2-drop 3/2, that probably won't stay in the back anymore, depending on how many guys I can get. Plus, there's some other adjustments we're going to be getting into that kind of they don't mess up the deck as much as they make some minor adjustments, right? So coming in, we do have a Callista change. At this point, realistically, you could probably just call it a buff because the existing Callista was not very good. So a couple things happen. First off, Callista gets an additional health. She goes from 2 health to 3 health. She does lose the bond with an ally to give it +2/0, and now the nuke text requires her to have seen 4 allies die. So it's kind of one of those tough ones, right? Like it becomes harder to level up, but that one additional stat is kind of interesting because if you kind of think about like Wraithcaller, right? Wraithcaller was a 4-drop 4/3, and it could make a missed Wraith. So how often was he trading with a 3/2? It was a big pain in the ass to try to kill him because of the fearsome. So like you could never like double chump block him to kill him because you couldn't put like a 2/1 and then a 1/1 and finish him off or anything like that. Callista still follows that same path of still having the fearsome, so it makes it much easier. Much harder to actually okay, jam my 2/1 or 2/2 into it and then Vile Feast kill it or block with my 1/1, Mystic Shot it, anything like that. But you still get to do like thermogenic beam to kill her on the round that she comes down. So I think this is overall interesting. I think the +2 for the bond probably wasn't super necessary, but then you kind of ask yourself, well, what did they do with the level up, right? So we get to Callista leveled up. It's like, okay, that 1 health bump applies here as well. That's, 5-4 is really good. I've talked about it before at length, but the difference between 3 health and 4 health is a very large amount in this game. Any of the 2-drop 3-2s, which are tons of them, or even some of the 3-3s that are 3-drops, it's like, okay, if your Ash trades with them, that stinks, right? But the 4 health changes things from a burn perspective. Black Spear can't get it. It's not like a 1/1 plus a Mystic Shot. You can't get excited it. Thermal has to be for 4 or more. So like that's a pretty big adjustment there, right? Like technically the Spectre Riders also shrunk. So I was gonna say when you have to block Spectre Riders in the ODJs or other like the fearsome units, you were like, oh, Frenzied Skitter, trades with my guy. This stinks. But anyways, so first time I attack each round, revive an attacking ephemeral copy of the strongest dead allied follower. This round we're bonded and it takes damage for me. So anyone kind of familiar with the pre-open beta, there used to be a much more busted Callista version which would bond with an ally, and then that ally would actually just take damage for her. So they kind of went somewhere in between. So she attacks, she revives an ephemeral version, meaning that this unit's not going to survive through the end of the round. So your attack's really good. It's coming in after her, so if they try to burn her out, they'd have to burn that guy out first or burn them at the same time, obviously in the correct order. And since that thing's going to die after combat anyways, it's kind of largely irrelevant. Anything that got thrown onto Callista will just kill that and you kind of just move on. There's probably some minor tricks where you could kill the other guy and then beat her in a fight, but that requires you to have, in a trick that's fast or burst. So she has pretty good protection in that regard. It's going to be interesting to see if you can use her with any of the followers that spawn additional units, right? So Rekindler, if you're in the late game, she flipped, she died, you Rekindler her back. If the Rekindler dies at some point and she stayed alive, then you're looking at reviving a Rekindler that pulls another Callista. It could do some interesting things, but that's kind of like super late game. On curve wise, it could be anything as far as like had a Wraithcaller come down, Wraithcaller died, she attacks, spawns the Wraithcaller, tries to get the shot for the Mist Wraith, and then it's like, okay, that's pretty sweet. Even getting something back like a Hapless Aristocrat could be, viable. The Hapless will take the damage for her, it'll die, it'll make a spider. And anything that's like the summon effects of the early days guys, right? Like House Spiders, even Frenzied Skitterer. If a Skitterer died, she can spawn it, shrink your opponent's board. Maybe they can't fearsome block anymore. Like that actually seems pretty sweet. She no longer pumps any of the stuff, but she has like that built-in protection. So we'll see if she's viable now, I guess. I think she's going to be a solid drop. We don't have any 3-drop 4/3s. In general, so her base side is going to be pretty solid. I think from an attack perspective, if you're wanted to continue playing fearsome, then she definitely has a home there. Whether you continue to run Hecarim or just from there, there's all sorts of different ways. But with the current lineup for Shadow Isles, as far as the 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, you could kind of play it similarly to how Demacia is playing stuff. Overall with their guys and having like a really strong curve out. So I think that's super interesting. So going from there, we have the Black Spear / Callista's Black Spear. So it affected both of them. It's now costing 3, right? It kind of stunk before when your opponent would be playing Shadow Isles. They could skip 1, play like a 2-drop on 2, maybe play a 2-drop on 3, and then now have 2 mana up. So it was like, oh man, are they going to glimpse me if I kill their guy? Or are they just going to like Black Spear me? So yes, having your guy die was kind of like a requirement, and it was, a pain in the butt at times. Anytime open attacks, like they start off the round and attack right away, like that felt miserable. But overall, if we kind of compare it to things like Get Excited, Thermo, any of the things that could like do 3 damage, Grasp cost 5, and yes, it gave you 3 health for the other 2, and you're just kind of like open specific, but 3 damage for 2 was kind of mean. There was a lot of things that had 3 health that you could kind of kill off. Elisa's, you could kill off, obviously Callistas, Fioras, Lucians, pretty much every early game guy. They didn't give you a guy with 4 Dravens, jinxes, etc., etc. So Black Spear was actually just really good there for 2. The adjustment to 3 should cut back some of the kind of early costed Shadow Isles cards to help you not have like those disgusting curve outs where an opponent missed one drop and then all of a sudden they can play multiple spells. So I think this is a pretty good adjustment. We're gonna see if there's any changes here with how things go, because Shadow Isles got hit not heavily, but several cards got hit. So it's definitely interesting. So we'll see how that goes. Coming in, we have Vanguard Lookout. I absolutely hated this guy. I probably had several videos where I was talking about, I won't even draft this guy because 1/4 not elite. I can't pump him outside of, a Bannerman. That's pretty terrible. They've now made him elite because Boom Crew Rookie just made him look like absolute trash. So they made him an elite. He works for, all of those elite setups. Now if you go the Battlesmith, sorry. You could Battlesmith into him and have a 2/5. Still not amazing, but it is a buff, and he works with the other setups. So that'll be nice in Expedition. Constructed-wise, the 1/4 is probably still way too small. They'd probably have to give him some other ability on top of that, toughness or something, to make it, worth it. Because, I'm still telling you, man, I don't care if you add Elite to him. Boom Crew Rookie's Texas bananas, and this guy's oh. So coming in, they did make a bunch of adjustments to Mage Seekers. Mage Seekers really weren't seeing a ton of play. So the old Mage Seeker Insider was still a 4 cost, and it used to have 1 power and 4 health, and it was discard a spell to grant him power equal to its cost. So if you pitched a big spell, you could have a big guy, but it cost 4 already, and then you'd have to dump a big spell, and just getting power wasn't very good. So what they've adjusted it to is now it's grant me +2/+2 when you've cast a 6+ cost spell this game. So 4-drop 4/3, slightly understated. You'd expect a 4-drop 4/4. And then can turn into a 6/5 if you play a 6-cost spell. So any sort of combat tricks would go and pump him in the middle of the combat, and that'd be pretty sweet. I still don't see it seeing pretty much any play, I guess I would say, just because you'd have to kind of be built around those 6+ cost spells. If it's once you've cast 6+ cost worth of spells, as opposed to cast a 6+ cost spell, like Lux's, right? It pays attention to how much you spent. Then I think it would be much better. Because at least then you could cast a 3 into something else, a 2 and a 1, or a 4 and then a 3, anything like that, where it would just actually get the pump and you not have to play active 6-cost spells. But this is an active improvement. The 1/4 was just not very good. You had to negative yourself, and it just did not feel great. Mage Seeker Investigator. Now we have still 3-drop 3/3. The old text was, if you cast a spell this round, remove all text and keywords from an enemy follower. I think that was actually a really good effect text. It was just hard to use because it was more of kind of a late game thing, where you'd have to open up with the spell, maybe a kill spell, okay, play it and blank a guy. And I think having Purify on a dude was pretty feasible at that point. It was just it was kind of hard to use. But they did adjustment. So now it's you create a Detain once you've cast a 6+ cost spell this game. Getting a Detain, I think, is quite strong, right? If we look at the 3-drop 3/3 that makes for Demacia in hand, it's okay, that one's really good for aggression, or just if you get enough guys on the table where you for Demacia and try to swing out for a game, or force your opponent to trade a bunch of their guys in because you'll kill them otherwise. So grabbing a Detain, I think late game, you're hitting curve, and then you cast a 6-cost spell and you can grab a Detain's okay. It goes back to the thing where actively casting a single 6-cost spell is actually kind of tough because she has to survive through it. So it's not like you could do it and then Ruination and get a Detain. So we'll see if this adjustment changes anything at all, but I think Expedition-wise, this is going to be pretty much a good change for her. There are a lot of, kind of those big spells, and we're going to see a couple, or at least one that got changed that is pretty good. So we'll definitely see how that goes. But like I said, I like the fact that they're willing to touch cards that just aren't really seeing any play. Boom, look, oh, surprise, another Mage Seeker. So he used to cost 6. His power was 4/1, and it was play discard a spell to grant me health equal to its cost. It was also pretty terrible. Costing 6, and then what? Even if you pitched an 8, right? Or you pitched anything and it gave +2 on top, which is not the effect text, I wouldn't have played it. 6 was just too much for that. We have active 6-drop crazy big statted guys. I think like 4/6s, 4/8s. Like Hecarim was big, but that's a champion, so it's different. Now it's a 2-drop 3/2, and it grants me +1/+1 in Challenger once you've cast a 6+ cost spell this game. So solid early game on curve guy. And then if you late game you cast any of those big spells, boom, gets a little bit of a bump. Grabs gains Challenger. I think this is another 4 Expedition card adjustment. So it's now going to be solid for that nice early on curve. And then if you happen to play a spell late game, cool. Get Challenger in the process. Get that mini stat boost. So I'm interested to see how these Mage Seekers variations end up working out. Like, could you hit the curve and then actively play, a 6-drop spell and like be super happy with all of the guys getting bumped? Maybe, but I don't know. In my mind, it's not going to be a largely relevant difference outside of the fact that like the stats are much more feasible now. Like dumping a spell to get bigger was just not very good, unless you were like combo killing with the one that got power. We've seen adjustment here with Crowd Favorite. Pretty much every aggro deck that could just spam the board ran Crowd Favorite. Obviously it's only Noxus, but he was just really strong. And kind of just a big pain in the butt. Anytime he was like a 4/4, 5/5, it was already just really good. And if you got the 6/6, it was just like, yeah, whatever, guy. Like, you're probably losing this game, because on 4, dealing with the 6/6 is really hard. But they scale back one of the health. To make it a little bit easier to kind of block and kill into, or spell kill it. So we'll see how that goes. Now if you get, 2 stat, it's only a 4/3. It's not really big, trades with a 2-drop. So you really got to get to that 5/4 power, give or take. And even then at that time, right, any of the 4-drop 4/3s could trade with it. So that one doesn't feel nearly as bad. We'll see if this adjustment makes any difference. I think you're not going to cut Crowd Favorites from your list if you're running them. It's just too good of a card. So, yeah. We get an Iceborne Legacy adjustment. And, like, Iceborne Legacy, outside of, like, Poros and the Spider decks, I hadn't really seen it do anything. But it used to cost 3. It gave an ally and all allied copies of it everywhere, +1/+1. And it was burst. Now it's slow, and it costs 5, but it gives +2/+2. So it's a permanent +2/+2. I think from a regular perspective, this is pretty atrocious, right? Like, 3 for 1/1 wasn't very good. I'm trying to think, like, what permanent spells did we have, right? We had Brothers Bond, which gave 2 guys +2/0 and cost 2. Then that was for permanent. We had the Freljord one that gave 3 health to 2 guys. I'm not going to bother trying to remember the name. I would mess that up. But I think it was also an Iceborne. Gave 3 health to 2 guys permanently. So from a cost perspective, this kind of makes sense, right? Since you're giving a single guy +2/+2 permanently, and it'll stay that way. We could see this potentially in the Freljord deck, maybe. Like if you think from standalone, right? Standalone costs 3, gives 1 guy +3/+3, and has to be by himself. So if they want to play 5 and pump one of the elusives +2/+2 and give each of the copies +2/+2, like that might do the job. I could see some crazy scenarios where, like, if I don't know what scenario they would do this, but if they pump like a Blade Scout and then they Kinko it and like 2 more came out, that could be real scary. I think mainly if you see this card, it's going to be used with the spiders though. Anyone that just wasn't aware, there was a whole deck about like creating the 1/1 spiders off of like Vile Feasts and Elises and Hapless Aristocrats, and you would Iceborne Legacy those so that any new ones that came out were just really big. So now if you cast the first one, like they go from 1/1s to 3/3s. You cast the second one, they're all 5/5s, and it's like, whoa, that's kind of scary, right? Like if you Vile Feasted and dealt 1 damage, healed 1, and then gained a 5/5 or a 3/3, it's like, whoa, that's really big there. At least swings out, makes a 3/3 attacking spider. So from a what they did perspective, I think the decks that would use it could gain very large benefits. Like I said, the Poro stuff makes it largely interesting. I think it still costs a bit much, but I'd rather them err on this side than we kind of just get like a real busted card. If it's still not seeing play, maybe they scale it back a point. But the making it slow is really nice in that you can respond and, kind of kill the guy off. But that also stinks for the card as a whole. I think at 5 it probably should still have burst, or at least fast, right? But they didn't make any of the pumps fast. They wanted all the pumps to either be burst or slow, from my understanding. So going to the next one, though, we get Pack Mentality. Now, Pack Mentality's old text was give an ally and other allies of its group +3/+3 and overwhelm this round. So the hard part about this was Freljord didn't really have groups outside of like Elnuks. You didn't have like archers or frost units or like none of those just had names. It was just Elnuks, and I think that was it. I lied. Poros could do it as well. Now though, if you do anything where you after that was like it was pretty much elite or spiders that were the big ones that could gain benefits from Pack Mentality. And I don't know if any of you guys have played Magic, but oh god, there was I cannot remember the name now, but anyways, it gave +3/+3 and trample to I think all of your units, and it was just like, oh, okay, that's insane. So +3 now it's adjusted though. It's no longer just to a group; it's to all of your allies, +2/+2 and overwhelm. So this is like the really nice kind of like finisher card. You cast it on your round, you've pumped all your guys, you swing out, and now they're just running over any chump blockers. So it's going to be a much better card in Expedition. I could see it getting some play in Constructed potentially. I don't know why you would run a Spider Freljord list, but I could see there being a Demacia Elite Freljord list. So like Pack Mentality, you get all the guys out. Instead of for Demacia, you get +3/+3. I'll take +2/+2 overwhelm all my guys. Will it likely do a ton there? Probably not, because they're going to be like on Bannermans, but maybe. Like there's a good shot where this becomes like the big thing there for the Mage Seekers or any of the board aggro decks, because you don't have to just have elites anymore, right? Like it's all your allies. So anything you spam a bunch of guys, this could be really good. We may see this potentially with the elusives, right? Elusives is kind of elusive through or quote unquote fly, but if they have any of the ground guys, Jeweled Protectors, Zeds, this +2/+2 overwhelm could be mildly disgusting, especially with like a Zed flip. It's like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But it does cost 7 and it's slow, so it's like it's expensive, man. It's a little too expensive. But who knows what we see? There could be some new aggro decks with it. I definitely like this change quite a bit. Just always got to be kind of concerned and scared over what's going to happen there. We get Poros next, getting cut down in cost from 4 to 3. I think they felt that Poros was already kind of like the worst thing to play. So now it costing 3 is much more relevant. If you get that 3 spell man up at any point, a Poros snack can come down and pump all the guys. So I think that's really nice for the Porex, but they were already kind of like in a tough spot. Expedition wise, that they wrote that they were hoping to help it out a bit. But I don't think that'll make a real adjustment in Expedition. Constructed-wise, I'd like to build a Poro deck. I just don't have the stuff. And it is kind of underpowered. But we'll see if spamming any of those guys can kind of do the job now. And with Pack Mentality, our non-Poro units could get those pumps too, and kind of be disgusting with like Heart of Fluffs and stuff. But after that, we get probably a nerf that many of the community has kind of been asking for, which is the Elnuk nerf. So, Troop of Elnuks, old text, 5 cost, 3/3. Summon each Elnuk in the top 10 cards of your deck. Mathematically, you were really at high odds to pop out with an additional Elnuk. They have now changed it to, it's for the top 6 cards in your deck. Summon each Elnuk and shuffle the rest into your deck. So they've done a couple things. One, they've explained better what the text was. This was essentially how the text worked before. Before, it was essentially said, for the top 10 cards in your deck, summon each Elnuk and shuffle the rest into your deck. A lot of people didn't know it shuffled, right? Because you'd play a troop. You might, find an Elnuk or two, and then you could draw an Elnuk and be like, what the hell happened? And it's just because it had a shuffle mechanic in, but people just didn't know. The weird part is the shuffle the rest into your deck. I'm always curious if, they shuffled the deck or they just shuffled those specific cards somewhere into the deck, right? Like there's a different concept if you took the cards and randomly placed them in different spots in the deck, because the odds of them being in the top cards were kind of low. But if you shuffled the entire deck, then it's just vastly different, right? Like let's say you had a 30 card deck left, you played it, it looked at the top 6, so you now have 24 left. If it randomly inserted those 6 into different slots, it would be very different from if it shuffled the entire deck. Like from the perspective of randomization, and well, your deck's random, so it's all relevant. Kind of makes sense. The differential being though is that like if you only looked at what the 25 areas it could be, on top of the first card versus like bottom of the last card, that's where we get the extra slot from, and just inserted them, then the rest of the place, like you just had lower odds of re-seeing any of those 6 cards that weren't, that weren't Elnuks, I guess. But I guess that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's just if you're looking for like an out and it was in the top 6, like they could just get like placed lower in the deck. Especially if you had anything that like inserted cards into the top of the deck, like Angry Eddies and stuff like that. But whatever, it's all irrelevant because that's kind of just like crazy next level. But so the big thing here is that people really, really felt bad about an opponent playing a 5-drop and then even getting, one other Elnuk felt kind of bad. Hitting multiples was just absolutely brutal. So I think this was a really good change for Constructed as well as Expedition. So like Expedition-wise, if an opponent had like a random Troop of Elnuk and a Bull, it's like whatever. Like you shouldn't probably hit it anyways, and your deck's smaller. Now if an opponent has like they stacked their Elnuks and had like 5 and 5 or 6 and 6, they still have pretty good odds of hitting it because you have a smaller deck. But you're not going to go absolutely crazy and continue to fill up board after board. So I think we'll see if Elnuks are still seeing play or not. But they lost a pretty large percentage. You lost 40% of what you were looking at in the top of the deck. And if you hit it exactly on 5, you'll have drawn 5 cards. So 4 plus 5, you have 31 cards left in the deck. You're now seeing about 20% of your leftover deck looking for whatever Elnuks are left. I don't know. We'll kind of see how that breaks down. But I definitely see where Troop of Elnuks is not heavily or as heavily played in a lot of those decks because it's not going to be as efficient. The on-drop for Bull Elnuk's still very good, but trying to go Troop into a large positive just doesn't happen. And if Troop into a small positive, I think still makes sense, right? Like the expectation is with 31 cards left, if you have 5 Elnuks left in the deck, then your odds are to hit one of them. Like mathematically, right? Like you're looking at 1/5 of the deck. You have 5 guys left. Seems reasonable. But I think because you're more inclined to miss now, it's gonna make people feel worse and then kind of just cut them. So I'd expect them to see play still at the beginning while people test it, and then it to kind of go away, and then for some very specific decks to get usage out of it. Any of the decks where you could draw specific cards from your deck that obviously weren't guys, or even if they were guys, right? Like you babbling your cards out of your deck and you thin it a bit, could still see some feasible usage from Troop of Elnuks. We see Navorti Conspirator lose 1 health. This doesn't look like it's super powerful, right? But if you kind of consider the fact that you have to recall, there's really weird situations with it. And Shadow Assassin's a 2/2 that draws a card and doesn't have to bounce any of the stuff. It's like, man, Conspirator got hit kind of like Kinko Lifeblade did, and you're playing them in very particular decks now. I don't think that really changes the way that you play like Zyzo Elusives, which is like the Zed Elusive deck, because you'd still pump whatever guy. Taking 1 less damage per round though does make it a bit harder to finish people off though. Not like a ginormous change, but it is annoying enough for this deck. And I don't think it'll really take it out of tier 1, because they've kind of adjusted pretty well with like Omen Hawk setups. But it is a bigger pain in the butt to only get like a 2/2. If you ever have to trade, it feels much, much worse because you can no longer block Fearsomes with it. And not being able to block the Fearsomes like natural means like there's going to be some problems when we're trading back and forth. So this one makes me kind of sad to see, but or both of these make me sad, but like I understand them. So Chump Bump lost a health. He goes from a 4-drop 4/4 to a 4-drop 4/3. He did give you 2 cards in hand. The Mushroom Clouds, while they weren't super useful in most decks, they did do things. They let you pitch them to Rummages. They let you pitch them to like get Exciteds. If you needed any of the spell stuff for like Ezreal, it was like, okay, that's really good. So it's unfortunate that he now can't, kill off those 2-drop pesky 3/2s that had Fearsome from Shadow Isles, which is like realistically how he first got in my versions of my deck. Like I absolutely loved him for that. That 4 health was just ginormous. You didn't die like to get Exciteds. You didn't get like Chump Locked and then Mystic Shot off the table. You'd had the Thermal for 4 to get him. Like those are just all great. I don't think this changes how much he sees play. It changes how you feel about him because of the whole like 2-drop trading situation now. Now if there's a War Chefs and a Laurent Protector, that's not Protector. It's not Bladekeeper either. Oh my god, I can't remember his name. But the 3-drop 2/4 Challenger, War Chefs could pump in and actually kill him and survive, which like kind of sucks. If you Fleet Feather Tracker is big enough to kill him and survive, if he gets the War Chef's pump. So it's rough, but I understand it. You were supposed to have bad stats for Piltover and Zon units, but you had the obvious good ones. Boom Kuruki. You had Kempunk Pickpocket, Chomp Womp. Those guys were just really great, and I would run them in like every Piltover and Zon deck and not bat an eye. And now I have to question this a little bit. The not being able to block 3/2s makes me feel real bad. Or, can't even trade with a Kempunk Pickpocket now, or a Iceveil Archer. Can't just kill it. Like, it's all trading, and that doesn't feel great. But when you want 2 Mushroom Clouds, you want 2 Mushroom Clouds. Oh, poor Chump Wump. Alright, so we get an adjustment to Flash of Brilliance here. I guess they didn't particularly like when you could Flash of Brilliance find another Flash or get some of the good cheap spells. So now you create a random spell that costs 6+ in hand and refill your spell mana. This is a really weird thing now. Because you only hit random spells from your regions, this changes the cards you can overall get. We're going to go look at 6+ in a bit at the end of this to talk about Flash of Brilliance and the adjustments. This might actually be a buff. So any of the decks that would want to run this and kind of find that crazy blowout spell, get a better shot at kind of doing that. But now if you wanted to hit like those cheap things to like kind of burst with Ezreal, that kind of doesn't work out. Sorry about that, guys. So I think it's interesting here for Lux now too. Lux would use Flash of Brilliance because it bursted, refilled the spell mana, so it would make it easier to get her Mystic Spark. I think that's it. I don't know, but and like do the 4 damage off the 0 cost. So it was just like, man, that was sweet. And then you'd sometimes see it with the Ezreal's decks where they would be able to flash burst through stuff and like combo kill people. But the main big one it was used with was Heimerdinger, and it doesn't change there. You still make a 3/1 elusive, but being able to hit a 6 cost spell means that 6+ cost spell means you could end up in some really interesting situations with really good cards, depending on like your region setups. Another hit we got, or this one was actually a buff. So Rummage used to feel really bad when you had the so Flash of Brilliance old effect was create a random spell in hand, refill your spell mana. Now it's create a random spell that costs 6+ in hand, refill your spell mana. Sorry, I forgot. There's going to be people listening on the audio only. So Rummage's old text was to play discard 2, draw 2. The new text is to play discard 2, draw 2. If you have exactly one other card in hand, discard 1 to draw 1. So it doesn't change the fact that it's a -1. But what it does do is it works a bit better with Jinx now. So if you get into that situation where you only have 1 card left, you could Rummage and just ditch that 1. And I think that's a really good, nice buff for it's weird in that like that was kind of one of the drawbacks. If you didn't have the 2 cards, it felt bad. Now if you have the 2 cards, you still can't avoid that because it's not like you get to choose, right? But you could play a card and then Rummage off that 1 and not hate life when you're playing the decks with like Augmented Experimenter or Jinx. So I like that buff quite a bit. But in general, I like Rummage a lot just because when you're playing Piltover Zon, I would try to like play those cards that I'd pretty much just play Chump Wump and get Mushroom Clouds and throw those away to get pluses. Or if you're playing Progress Days, you can like filter out Jinx. This was the card that would let you kind of flip in the middle of a spell setup, because you could play it, ditch the 2, have no hand in the middle of the effect, Jinx would flip, draw the 2, and then like kind of continue with whatever you're doing, all at burst speed, and like that was sweet. So I think that's, a great change for it. We might see some more play from it. Unstable Voltician. So oddly enough, I was like, man, this card's terrible. I then got dumpstered by this a couple times. So yeah, it's a really weird situation, because like he's a 5-drop 4/4, and his old effect text was, when I'm summoned, grant me +4, +0, and quick attack if you cast the 6-cost spell this game. So if you played against any of the decks that had Remembrance, which is the 6-cost Demacia spell to summon a 5-drop Demacian unit, or was it Unlicensed Contraption, or Illegal? I forget. It summons one of them, but anyways, it's a 6-drop Piltover and Zon spell that would summon you a 5/5. So like if you skipped 1, skip 2, here's a 5/5 unstable on 5. He was an 8/4 quick attack. It was so hard to get rid of him in Expedition. It was like bananas. Like I just straight up lost this guy on multiple occasions. In like the recent weeks, people just started drafting him and like hitting that spell into him, and I was like, oh shit. And this one guy actually even gave Overwhelm to it, and I like lost my mind. I was like, oh my god, and that was like my 7th for the 7th win. So I just got like obliterated by it. But they've adjusted him same way they adjusted the Mage Seekers. So we'll see if that kind of changes, because now you could cast him and then play the 6-cost spell and get that pump. So you can get it like mid combat now, which could be like real disgusting. Yes, many changes. Many changes. All right, so now we get Brute Awakening. It's the 5-cost. It used to be a 6-cost, summon 3 Spiderlings, then grant Spider allies +1 attack with no additional health, and it was a permanent buff. It's now costing 5. They wanted to change some of the power from overall Shadow Isles cards to like the synergy cards. I thought Brute Awakening was pretty good when it cost 6, because essentially it summoned you 3 2/1s. So you could block with them, you could attack with them, and like if you skipped 1 and 2, you could just start the game with 3 2/1s. It being a 5-cost now, pretty solid. Adjustment for it, I think it's still going to be super duper scary, any of the spider decks. And we might see it come back, because I hadn't seen it in a while, to be honest with you, from a lot of decks. But it sets up really well. 5 cost for, 6/3 worth of power via 3 guys. It's pretty good. If you had any other spiders, like it's real solid there. Mark of the Isles. A lot of people were really upset with this card. A lot of people loved beating people with this card. If it's weird, right? Because like normally pump spells, if you draw too many of them, are supposed to be bad. But if you hit multiple Mark of the Isles, you'd actually just obliterate people. Because you could like cast 2 of them. You're like, oh well, I have +6/+6. Get bent. Oh, they try to like burn your guy out. You're like +3/+3 swing kick, and you're just like, oh my god, I hate this thing. So Mark of the Isles no longer gives +3/+3 in Ephemeral. It gives +2/+2 in Ephemeral. They maintain the grant portion though. So if you play Deathmark, which is the thing that would move Ephemeral from a unit to another unit, you can still give the unit +2/+2 in Ephemeral and then shift it to an opponent's guy, and maintain that +2/+3 through the future rounds. So they made those adjustments to kind of scale back Shadow Isles, cheap things. Mark of the Isles was never particularly good at being on the opponent's turn unless you were blocking with it. So, my 1/1 trades with your 4/4. Now they made it a little harder. Your 1/1 can't trade with a 4/4 anymore, or a 4 health unit. But that doesn't change the fact that your 2/1 can. So I like this change right now. You don't feel nearly as bad when you attack or use a burn spell. And like they mark, like, yeah, it's only 1 attack and 1 health, but that's much larger than you'd ever anticipate. If you ever had to like get excited, or just like overall 3 damage spell something, and then it got Mark of the Isles, you just like feel bad. Now if you hit a guy with 1 health with it, because you just got forced into it and they mark, it's still alive. You feel okay about it. I think this will still see play. I don't think it'll make any large adjustments, but the difference between that 1 power is really huge. Because, as most of you guys can get to 1 health in a game and still win it. And Mark of the Isles was that big difference. So it's been asked for a while. Rekindler was just kind of too good. It kept guys around. You'd pull back your champion and it'd be like a really big champion, and often pulled back like a 5 or 6 cost champion, which is absolutely disgusting. They didn't want to nerf it too hard. So it used to be a 6-drop 4/4. When I'm summoned, revive the strongest dead ally champion. It's now just a 7 cost. That's the only change they made. They didn't, nerf it into oblivion. They'll probably still monitor it at the current cost. But the theory is that Rasa and Ledros, the 1-cost adjustments, did a lot of good things for it overall. So I think their hope here is that because Rekindler is going to cost 7 now, it can come in late enough into the game where it's not kind of like a huge issue. Like, from a game perspective, it's only 1 round later, but 1 round later is kind of pretty far, right? So if you were on curve for, let's say, like Garen, you'd hit it on 5. If Garen died, it'd be 6. You'd have to cast Rekindler if you're the odds player on 7, so your opponent can kind of like play other stuff to block. Whereas like now it's still like, okay, Hecarim on my opponent's turn, swing it on my turn. If he dies, I can bring him back on that same round. But it does make it harder to combo with other spells. We don't kind of give it enough credit how much like 1 additional cost changes things. Like, how often do we struggle with like playing deny with a guy now because we can only save 3 spell mana? So Rekindler kind of being back that additional round adjusts your overall kind of like drop expectancy. If you have like, especially in a situation where you have like, let's say like Elise and Hecarim, or you have like that early drop plus the later game drop, hitting Rekindler on 7 is probably not going to be largely beneficial unless you had that like 4, 5, 6 cost champion that did die, on curve or somewhere around there. So we'll definitely see on that. I think Rekindler is still going to be really strong. At 7, I don't really have any intent to cut down on running him. In general, I tend to only run like 2. Unless I had like 6 just blowout champions, and my curve kind of allowed for having 3 of them. But I think this will still be fine. You may not see it as a 3 of anymore. 2 of probably makes sense. I think we're seeing a lot more like missed call as of recent. So we'll see how that kind of adjustment goes. But I think this makes sense. They didn't want to kill it too bad, and they hit so many other Shadow Wells cards. They kind of need to, see what happens and deliberate from there. So they do talk about a watch list. I'll read, verbatim what they have. Watch list: Elise and Frenzy Skitterer. We've previously mentioned keeping an eye on fearsome units as a whole, so consider this an addendum directed at specific cards. Elise and Frenzy Skitterer are both durable, versatile, and evasive threats we've seen used in a larger number of decks than we think is healthy. We want to take it slow in powering down regions and avoid over-nerfing cards, so we're hoping the changes to other Shadow Isles tools reduce the effectiveness of these spiders. For now, we'll continue to monitor the strength of these 2 and make additional changes in the future if needed. I think if they adjust Skitterer, they'll probably take a health away from it at some point. I think the difference between 3 and 2 health only matters for removal, because with Fearsome, they can't block anyways with a 2 power unit, so it's just like, going to 2 power is probably fine. At least probably applies the same way. So I could see if they determine that they're still too good, they'll remove a power from each of them and then make it so that on when attempting to block, it doesn't feel nearly as good. Frenzy Skitterer, you just pummel guys with like 2 combat. So like if your Avarosan Sentry would swing back, like Elise or Skitterer would kill it. So I could see that happening. Glimpse Beyond. Glimpse Beyond is an efficient card advantage tool that doubles as a synergy play in many Shadow Isles decks. We've decided to watch this Glimpse as the card advantage combined with the ability to soft deny strikes or certain spells can be frustrating to play against. That said, we're hoping it can stay at its current cost, as Glimpse Beyond is a pivotal core card for Shadow Isles and its synergies. Similar to Elise, our tuning options here are constrained given Glimpse's low mana cost design, and any change at all may end up severely nerfing it. If we see indications that Glimpse is overly problematic, even after other Shadow Isles changes settle, we'll reconsider. So essentially, Glimpse Beyond was quite good. There were some dilemmas, right? There's a lot of situations where sometimes if you glimpse, you can mess up kind of your own sequencing, right? Like if you had the spell mana and you were hitting on curve and you had some other guys to play, but you had to like glimpse, or you decide to glimpse and respond to like a damage spell, like you may not have the board control you were looking. You might have missed like playing your drop for a round. And there are some odd sequencing. Like from a card advantage perspective, it's really good. But you do have to remember that if you don't, like some of the decks that you're running it in are very particular about having some board control or being able to like push in for early damage. So like there were times where if you're hitting curve, glimpse can be a struggle. So I understand like it going watch list. I think it was a really great card. I don't think it was broken beyond belief. Um, it's just quite good. And then in general, the setups for stuffing like people's lifesteal and stuff were really good. So I think it makes sense to watch list it, pay attention to it. I don't see it really getting nerfed at anytime soon because like they mentioned, any real nerfs to it could be largely destructive. Like making it slow doesn't feel good. Um, the only thing I could think is like if they made you only have like a certain amount of units, I guess, or if it's like um, a unit not in combat or something like that. Then it's like okay, like it still works versus like removal, but it doesn't work as much versus like chump block and sack and draw two. So I can see something like that. But anyways, Shadow Assassin. Shadow Assassin is the most played card in Legends of Runeterra, and for good reason. Reasonable, elusive stats plus free card advantage makes this card a near auto-include for Ionia and a frequently splashed card for other regions. We've discussed and tested out number-based changes such as 1-2 for power, 2-1 for power, or a 4-cost 2-2, but none of them left the Assassin in a spot that felt right. For now, we've decided to watch the Shadow Assassin and continue to monitor her for potential changes in the future. I think if they change her, they just cut a health away. Cutting a power just makes her like not played. Making her 4-cost is probably reasonable, but I think as a person who plays Shadow Assassin all the time as well, cutting a health away makes the most realistic sense. Drawing a card is like considerably broken from the card advantage perspective, but on 3 she's still understated. The elusive is really good. She kind of like pot shots in bits over time. I think if they just got rid of a health, you'd be like, okay, whatever. Because she'd still pot shot in. She'd still kind of like chump block in trade with guys. She just wouldn't be able to like murder little 1-drop spiders, which losing that ability is probably not largely irrelevant. If a bunch of people, though, are playing things like Boomclue rookies, and I guess a bunch of people are already playing Vile Feast, then it like feels much worse, but I think you're kind of okay with that advantage differential. So last but not least goes for some game pacing and feel stuff. So game pacing and feel. Last patch, we improved the feel and speed of basic moments you encounter every game. We've made further progress in 0.9.2, and are tweaking specific cards and interactions that we've heard are especially rough on both your turn timer and your sanity. Highlights include continued general improvements, including smoother blocking and clearer action cues as you play units and spells. A variety of poison puffcap animations take less time and can overlap with one another for beautiful rolling waves of mushrooms. Draven's spinning axes take less time when both created and cast. Level 2 Hecarim's buff visuals are significantly faster, especially across many ephemeral allies. Eager Apprentice, Inspiring Mentor, and Tortured Prodigy now take a more appropriately short amount of time for their simple effects. And the discard animation is now faster and clearer, and opponent discards now properly reveal the card before disintegrating. Yeah, there are definitely a ton of times where I would pitch cards, or opponent would pitch cards, and I could like barely see a glimpse of what the heck it was, and then have no idea. So overall, I do like the adjustments. I felt Hecarim buffing mid-combat was absolutely insane with how much time that took. Especially since like he didn't buff until you hit OK, so it was the opponent's action, and it was like bing, poo, poo, and you got these freaking like puff clouds of like flame damage going on guys. Not really flame damage, just kind of the whole like spirit-based like blue fires. But anyways, so I think that's sweet. Puff caps used to take a long time too. We've also made a first step toward improving turn timers. We have more work and tuning to do here, but the kind of frustrations players were experiencing in some scenarios, not getting to finish actions, not getting to act at all on their turn, etc., was unacceptable, so we've immediately shipped some quick fixes. Next up, we're looking at early turns that go too long, late game turns that are over too quick, and the frustration of being roped turn after turn by opponents who aren't actually playing the game. Keep telling us about the worst case scenarios you're encountering. So casting a burst spell now puts some timer back on your turn timer, and you'll now get some extra time on your turn after your opponent casts spells on theirs, quote unquote, to guard against a bunch of your opponent's end of turn burst spells eating away your turn. Essentially what happens is, like, let's say I played like 5 mushroom clouds, I could like jam all 5 on the board and then pit like okay, and they'd still be like making animations and stuff when it's your opponent's current turn. So they've adjusted a lot of those. I think that's super sweet. I think cutting down on the turn timers, at least on round 1, and like most likely 2 is just largely relevant. There's not a ton you can do that early. Like, what the hell is taking you so long? I actually still leave on the auto pass on, because I tend to play like control decks, so I can usually respond anyways, meaning in the later rounds it'll actually still stay there. But early on, like, it just kind of blip, go through these rounds real quick. Yeah, there are some bug fixes too we'll get to in a second. But Expedition archetypes, they've made some adjustments. Demacian Steel has continued to be one of the strongest archetypes, so we're removing a solid card that fits in another archetype and replacing it with something more situational. They've added Mobilize, and they've removed Back-to-Back. Noxian Might has proven too reliable at taking huge chunks of enemies' Nexus with cheap, aggressive units backed by similar spells, so we're removing an efficient burst spell in favor of one that will give an opponent an opportunity to react. They've added Guile. They've removed Elixir of Wrath. So quick heads up. Mobilize is the 3 cost that decreases all the cost of all your units in hand by 1. Back-to-Back is a 6 cost +3/+3. Guile is the 1 cost stun a unit. And they removed Elixir of Wrath as the 1 cost +3/0. Shroom and Boom is an archetype that can be very strong when everything comes together, but it's still a little inconsistent overall. We're removing a slower elusive unit in favor of a spell that synergizes with cards like Eager Apprentice and Assembly Bot, while providing blockers to buy time for the Shrooms to work their magic. Eager Apprentice is the 2-drop 2/1 that gives you back 2 spell mana. Assembly Bot is the 3 cost 1/1 that every time you play a spell gets +1/+1 permanently. They added Scrapdash Assembly, which is the 2 cost like summon 2/1/1 like junk things. They've removed Amateur Aeronaut, which is a 3 cost 2/3 elusive. Spellbound. Spellbound more directly revolves around casting spells that cost at least 6 mana due to the new Mage Seeker changes, so we're replacing a spell that's a little too cheap with one that fits the bill. They've added Back-to-Back. They've removed Detain. Detain's like the removal baby. How are you going to do that to him? All right, Relentless has been helmed by Garen on the Demacia side, which has helped him become the most played champion in Expeditions. To mix things up, we're replacing him with Lucian, who has a rally effect on both his champion spell and his level 2 form. We're also replacing a unit that saves your other units with one that makes them easier to trade to better support Lucian's level up. So they've added Lucian and Laurent Duelist. Laurent Duelist is a 3-drop 3/2 that when you play or when summoned gives one of your guys Challenger. I forget which one it is. And then they removed Garen and Brightsteel Protector. Brightsteel Protector's so good! Why would you do this to us? Brightsteel Protector is the 2-drop 3/2 that gives a guy Barrier. That one's for play. Battle Scars has been still underperforming, so we're removing some of the more inconsistent utility cards in favor of ones that are more directly powerful. Note, the first 2 swaps were communicated in the 0.9.0 patch, but didn't make it until now. They've added Might, which is the 3 cost +3/0 in Overwhelm. Alpha Wildclaw, the 6-drop 7/6 Overwhelm. A Varosan Marksman, the 3-drop 3/1. Or was it a 2/1? Sorry, 3-drop, I think 2/1 maybe. That deals 1 damage. And then Battle Fury, the +8/+4. They've removed Blood for Blood, which I believe is the Transfusion card. The 2 cost deal 1 damage to a guy, and then give another unit +2/+2. Bull Elnuk, 4-drop 4/5. Kindly Tavern Keeper, the 3-drop 2/3 that can give 3, or not give 3 health, heal 3 health to a ally, which could also do the Nexus. And Starlit Seer, the 2-drop 2/2, where you played a spell and gave the top unit of your deck +1/+1. Shadows and Dust is simply more dependent than most archetypes on having a solid, cohesive deck, since ephemeral units get stronger the more you're able to commit to them. They increase the chance that Shadows and Dust will appear in wild picks when it's your primary archetype. So Shadows and Dust was the whole like ephemeral set archetype. And they're just trying to give you more like Soul Shepherds and Stirred Spirits and all of that jazz. Total Recall has been struggling to find enough consistent damage sources that can finish off an opponent, so we're removing one of its weaker cards in favor of an additional elusive unit. They added Amateur Aeronaut, which is a 3-drop 2/3 elusive. They removed Golden Crushbot, which is a 3-drop 2/5. Arachnophilia could use a little more flexibility in how its spiders clash with much larger enemy units, so they added Elixir of Wrath to it. Language support. We've added additional language support to Legends of Runeterra. More to come. New players should be correctly auto-detected, while existing players can swap languages in their login screen settings. So they have Spanish, which is Latin America, and Portuguese, Brazil, now supported. So bug fixes. And I really love some of these bug fixes because there's really bad situations that happen in game. I don't know how many of you guys have played and your opponent draws a card and some puff caps go off on it, and then it's stuck in the stupid middle of the screen. And you're playing around it literally until your opponent plays the damn card. And you just don't see it in their hand, and you're like trying to click on the units hiding behind the card. It's insane. So players should now be able to edit/save decks even if they're at the deck maximum. Very nice. Players should no longer occasionally get stuck in full art view when receiving a friend challenge. I've never seen that, to be honest with you. Plaza Guardian and Scuttle Guys no longer revert to their full mana cost after being summoned. I think that's relevant if there's anything that kind of looks at the costs, especially for ties, right? So like if you had stun like weakest enemy and there were 2 6/6s, Plaza Guardian or something else, it being the cheaper cost means that's going to get hit. The Rekindler is now highlighted in hand when it will successfully revive a champion. The highlights are the orange shimmering border, saying, hey, this ability is going to work. Black Spear and Shunpo can now target allies. Oh, okay. Dawn and Dust should no longer occasionally cause pink streaks when cast. I've seen that so many times. It was disgusting. So many copies of things, trying to play Dawn and Dust combos. I know, I was a dirty Dawn and Dust combo player for a bit. Accelerated Pursuit's resolution animation should now play correctly. Spinning Axe, voiceover effect, or I think voice effects, cleaned up. Probably just the noises. I survived effects on units should no longer activate when units are dealt 0 base damage. And then miscellaneous crash fixes and miscellaneous card font fixes. All right, that's sweet. But yeah, we have an overall complete change. By the time most of you guys will listen to this, the update will probably already be going. So I think overall that's super duper sweet. And we're going to kind of see what ends up happening to Shadow Isles and just decks as a whole. I think, the new Demacia Rekindler deck pretty much didn't get hit outside of Rekindler getting shifted to 7. So I think it'll be super interesting. And I'm going to see if I can upload the infograph that has like what all of these cards were. But I did say I'm going to go look at the spells real quick. All right, so let's go look at the deck builder. So if we look for 6+ spells, and we go one at a time. So if you're, so Starfire as it starts off as Piltover, right? So Piltover only has these actually. So if you're mono Piltover, it's like, okay, Hex deck, Unlicensed Innovation with the Illegal Contraption, True Shot, and Progress Day. So like this doesn't feel amazing, but if you were looking to find Progress Day more, like that does increase your odds, and it increases the odds of you finding this piece of removal, which was actually pretty huge, right? So that's sweet. It just probably feels bad if you flash into an Illegal Contraption. You really just didn't want access to that. But if we go over to Shadow Isles, so if you're sharing with Shadow Isles, 3 of these are absolutely insane, right? Like if you get Harrowing, Ruination, or Vengeance, you're like, oh my god. Like Brood Awakenings now only cost 5, so you can't find this anymore. Atrocity still costs 6. So if you're playing a Piltover Shadow Isles deck with Flash of Brilliance, you've increased your odds of finding like real strong cards. That's real nice. Noxus only has Reckoning, so if you're going Noxus, you're pretty much not going to find anything else, but you usually don't do that. Ionia gets a little interesting. Stand United, sweet card. Ritual of Renewal, Shadow Flare, Dawn and Dusk. It's like, okay, these aren't super amazing, but if you're playing with Lux, right, Flash of Brilliance is now much better. You're guaranteed to get that additional spell that you're going to be able to cast that pops off Lux by itself in general. So, working with that, the Mage Seekers becomes much more interesting. Demacia has a ton of spells, and most of these you're probably not going to be super happy with. Like, I don't think I'm happy if I find it for Demacia or Redoubled Valor, but maybe, like, if you're playing Heimerdinger and you, Heimerdinger Lux, and you kind of like, all right, Flash of Brilliance into a dude, here's the thing, another dude, and then you, like, for Demacia, it's like, oh, like, that's, not too bad. Not too bad. And then last but not least, we've got Freljord, which also sets up into some interesting ones. Pack Mentality is a new nice one to get. Harsh Winds, Winter's Breath, Battle Fury, War Mother's Call. So overall, Flash of Brilliance, kind of changes the way that it's operating, but it can find you these big blowout cards that are, disgusting, mildly disgusting, whatever you want to call it. Like if you find a Battle Fury off of Flash of Brilliance, and now you're like, oh, I'll swing with my 3/1 Elusive, Floor Be Gone. Like, oh, Battle Fury. get bent. It's like, oh shit, you died, sucker. So I think overall the Flash of Brilliance change out is pretty interesting. We'll see how relevant this becomes, but just want to thank you guys for watching, and as always, never skip chess day. Deuces.